How's it going, everyone? I wanted to read something that Kristen Abbott wrote on the Renee Girard Medic Theory Facebook group. I thought it was pretty wonderful and beautiful, and about the Virgin Mary and mimetic theory and femininity and culture, modern culture. So we will read it here, and I'll link it in the description if you want to check it out yourself and join the group as well, because it's really great with some very interesting and smart people. So here we go. I've been thinking about the tragic case of Lindsay Clancy, a U.S. mother of three who stands charged with the murder of all her children. First, it's clear the more facts remain to be publicly disclosed, such as the particularities of her postpartum diagnosis for which she was seeking intensive treatment, whether she was diagnosed with postpartum psychosis, how premeditated the murders may have been, and whether she had recently had any change in medication that have contributed to or worsened a mental instability which would have sparked this gruesome crime. So my discussion here isn't necessarily on the case of Lindsay Clancy in particular, because more remains to be revealed, but rather the case inspired these thoughts. Majority of the photos shared by the media are lifted from publicly shared photos of Lindsay's Facebook account. It made me consider the challenge of social media in encouraging mimetic rivalry among a certain class of relatively affluent mothers. I am a mother myself, and on the grounds of principles surrounding my minor rights to digital privacy, I've chosen not to share my family life online. Until Lindsay, however, I did realize that perhaps I made a useful choice in a game so toxic that the only winning move is not to play at all. Lindsay is within splitting distance of my age, so I know that the entire world surrounding Instagram and Facebook mom culture is a tough one in which to meaningfully participate. There's always a woman out there on Instagram who is blonder, thinner, who bounces back to her pre-baby body faster, whose yoga skills are more refined, whose Christmas tree is more stylishly decorated, whose husband is more handsome, whose children are more accomplished, whose car is more luxurious, whose home is more in fashion, whose goals are more effortlessly accomplished, whose children are dressed in more matching Christmas PJs on Christmas morning, whose photos are more beautiful, and on and on and on. There's always another rival out there, and one can live in a perpetual state of dissatisfaction against the imagined or even real perfection of the rivals. I'm not saying that this difficult dynamic is the direct cause of Lindsay's terrible choices, or even a secondary or tertiary cause, but it surely plays some role. Compare the tough, affluent online culture of the Instagram mom rivals, however, to the Virgin Mary. In Catholicism and Orthodoxy, though the Virgin knows no bounds, the Virgin Mary is venerated and esteemed as the highest example of human communion with God and a model for women in particular. The Virgin and through anti-Catholic Protestant conceit of the Virgin Mary is often quite modernist, antagonistic to the Virgin, and even Marxist in its conceit of the Virgin Mary as an example of a patriarchally oriented structure which helps, quote unquote, keep women pure from men. While it's certainly possible that the Virgin could be used in that way, in the same sense she can be used on the cover of Vanity Fair to promote the singer Madonna, that may not be a correct way to understand her, and wouldn't be how she understood herself and how those immediately following her in the ancient world would have understood her. Instead, the purposes of her virginity, as Jonathan Pageau once noted, is to house the totality of reality, Christ, the Logos himself, who is the sum of all patterns of existence. She is further oriented not towards some weird metagame on Instagram, but rather toward the existence of the triune God. She is not the pagan goddesses. She's not like the pagan goddesses who only sow confusion and disorder through the chaotic feminine, but she provides the respite of much needed harmony and order. The Virgin Mary provides the counter to the Instagram mom culture. She is a model, but a positive one. She places no pressures on mothers. She does not compete. She only intercedes and loves in a maternal capacity to bring woman into a higher order of love. Little about the Virgin's own life was Instagrammable. Some scholars believe the reason Mary left Nazareth to visit her cousin St. Elizabeth, quote unquote, the visitation, was to avoid being stoned as a yet to be wed young woman. She has a child seemingly out of wedlock, gives birth in a rough shad place, and has to flee into Egypt to live among pagans because the life of her son is threatened by the Klein king, who allegedly is supposed to provide some degree of protection for the Jews against their Roman occupiers, but is a corrupt, evil man through and through. She manages to lose the Son of Man, Ancient of Days, the incarnation of the Creator, the long hoped for Messiah, for 3 days. Her only child has no real occupation that confers any status at all. Instead of being a proper rabbi who could have well joined the esteemed Sanhedrin, he goes around Israel and Samaria, camping out with a group of misfit randos, including Jewish men who, until quite recently, had collected taxes for the Roman oppressors, and possibly even women who had been prostitutes. He doesn't marry a virginal shampoo model of a woman from a nice Jerusalem family who can host an Instagram-worthy seder, but instead he dies childless, unwed, and in the most shameful, humiliating death possible, between a robber and a revolutionary, and she, now a widow and childless, is left to the care of one of the randos who followed her son, St. John the Beloved. If our American culture were less anti-Catholic in its views, we could reorientate ourselves toward the Virgin Mary as the most gentle model, particularly for the woman and especially for mothers. Comparing the Virgin with Instagram isn't even a contest. The Virgin intercedes, carries the weak and worried upon up toward a higher order with God, understands completely losing your child at the playground, having a sink full of dirty dishes, and having a Christmas that isn't perfect. There is a room with the Virgin for the imperfection and mess that is motherhood that Instagram does not provide. Room that is filled with compassion, understanding, and divine aid. Perhaps instead of becoming intertwined with all the photos of Instagram and the perfect homes and the thin women and the beautiful families, we could look instead to the image of the Virgin Mother, whose own life was so human, but whose boundless love is rooted in the divine life that order the challenge and chaos of this world toward another way of existing. So that was Kristen Abbott posting in the Rene Girard Mimetic Theory reading group. Thought it was absolutely beautiful. And I hope you enjoyed. Leave a comment. I'll put the link in the description. And yeah, bless you. I'll see you next time.